Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. And this week, in addition to doing my series on Folklore the Affliction, the board game, I'm also going to try to read a short horror novella or short story collection every morning and do a review for that. And today I decided to kick things off with the next part of my Ranking of Kings series. And that is Stephen King's The Cycle of the Werewolf with illustrations by Bernie Wrightson. So Cycle of the Werewolf was published in hardback in 1983 and the paperback version here in 1985. It is an illustrated novel with words by King and art by Bernie Wrightson. It began its life as a calendar project. Bernie Wrightson was going to create a piece of art, and then King was going to write a very short snippet about that art, and the whole story was supposed to be in a calendar. But it expanded into a short, about 120-page novella, and I think it's better for it. So Cycle of the Werewolf, it tells the story of a werewolf haunting the small town of Tarker Mills, and each month of the year gets its own chapter. So there we have that kind of calendar connection. And then each month during the full moon, a werewolf claims its new victim. This is a book that I would always look at the bookstore. It was $13 cover price, and back in 83, 85, that was a lot of money for me. Being in elementary school and just getting a small allowance. And so it wasn't a book that I was ever really able to afford. And also, I don't remember coming across it at my school library where I would check out books when I was starting to get into Stephen King. So it wasn't one of the earlier books that I read. And I really don't remember the first time I read it, but I do remember looking through the book and just being completely wowed by the art. When I was young, I really wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be an illustrator, and I got kind of discouraged from that profession throughout art school and taking art classes. But I love drawing, and I still really like drawing. I especially like black and white art, and Bernie Wrightson's line work is just exquisite. And so the thing that I always remember about this book, even after reading it multiple times, is the art. This picture right here for March is especially cool. It looks like there's like these faces in these rocks. There's that phenomenon where you see faces in things, and this looks like a shrouded figure. I don't know, this picture really creeps me out, and his black and white line work, like I said, is just incredible. His color work is nice too, but I do prefer the black and white. There's a lot of the art. Look at those clouds. My God. Awesome. I love art of clouds. I don't know if you guys have seen that old Japanese animated film, Robot Carnival, but there's a segment in that film called Clouds, which is just this little robot boy walking while the clouds in the sky change shape. And it's one of my favorite pieces of animated art, and this picture reminds me a lot of it. But the art can be really gruesome, and it reminded me of like the old Mars Attacks art. And so because of its gruesome nature, it totally appealed to me as a kid, and back then it was a little harder to get our gore fix. I would often go into bookstores and look at like Fangoria and that kind of stuff to get my fix of gore for the month. I've always liked this one where the werewolf is ripping off the cop's face. That's super cool. But the book itself is pretty entertaining, if somewhat slight. It's like a work of pure genre. It only has just little tiny hints of King's strong depiction of character and drama. We get a little bit of that in the longest chapter, which is for July. And we learn a little bit about our wheelchair-bound hero, Marty Kosla. And Through that chapter, we learn a little bit about his relationships with his parents, his sister, his uncle, and like kind of like the other children in the town. And that is somewhat important because we need him to latch onto to be heroic at the end of the book. Another thing that I think, besides the art, even though the story is slight, I think what this book is a good example of is King's attention to and how he utilizes form and structure. King is really concerned about how his stories are structured. It is a great example. It's this giant novel, but he uses chapters, subchapters, interludes, all kinds of things to break up this big work into smaller, kind of bite-sized, manageable pieces. And the structure of it also adds to the overall feel of the novel by creating these chunks of time. And Cujo is the exact opposite. There are no chapters or breaks at all in Cujo. It's one long, continuous series of events, and it's told that way to create tension. So presenting Cycle of the Werewolf, giving each month its own chapter, really does strengthen this idea of this progression of time, of the time revolving around the full moons. And even though King admits fully that he takes quite a bit of liberty of when the full moons would happen each month, but he does so for thematic reasons, for dramatic tension, and I think it totally works. But the form really, it illustrates how important that is to King, and in keeping the calendar-like form of this novella, I think they did a really neat thing in setting this apart from just a normal novella, and I like that quite a bit. Bernie Wrightson's art, though, is really, I think, the main takeaway from Cycle of the Werewolf. It is the thing that I remember. Like I said, it's an integral part of the narrative as well. He's not just illustrating things that happen, although he is doing that. There is more to it. You get these kind of interlude pieces where you get the sense of the changing of the seasons and of the passing of time. There's one piece in particular provides a really great reveal for the overall mystery, and I always love approaching that piece of work. If you had seen it just now, you wouldn't have known that it was a spoiler until you start to piece together some of the other things going on. This really is a graphic novel in its kind of purest meaning of those words. And I would not want to read this without the art. And so the two work together to create a whole that is pretty good. I'm not gonna, it's not great. It's not super memorable beyond the art. It's written in kind of a very sparse style, something that King doesn't write in this style a lot. It's almost like a journalistic style, kind of. But yeah, so let's take a look at the ranking board and see where this is going to go. All right, so here is the placard I made, the name placard for A Cycle of the Werewolf. We got those green eyes of the werewolf there. I'm having so much fun making these these name placards. And just to recap, we've got Pet Sematary in number 1, The Mist, Desperation, Skeleton Crew, Tommyknockers, Firestarter, and Needful Things. And Cycle of the Werewolf is not particularly great, but it's also immensely readable and entertaining. It is one that I return to frequently. And so in that sense, I must like it at least somewhat to read it, every couple years or so. And the fact that it's so short makes that possible. And so I'm going to place that right above Tommyknockers here, right below Skeleton Crew, which I think is a solid entry, solid collection of short stories. And that is where Cycle of the Werewolf is going to live for now on this list. So we've got, continuing in the number 1 spot, which will probably be there for some time, Pet Sematary, The Mist, Desperation, Skeleton Crew, Cycle of the Werewolf, Tommyknockers, Firestarter, and Needful Things. So all right, you guys, well, hope you enjoyed that. Stay tuned tomorrow for a look at A horror novella from an author that is pretty underrated, I think. So, all right, guys, we'll take it easy. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.